What if science fiction was actually more daring before CGI could fix everything? The 1970s gave filmmakers limited technology, but almost unlimited imagination. Directors had to build real sets, invent practical effects, and trust strange ideas that modern studios might reject as too risky. The result was a decade filled with artificial intelligence, alien encounters, environmental warnings, dystopian futures, and space adventures that still feel alive today. If you love classic science fiction, hit the like button, share this video with another movie fan, and subscribe to our channel. Number 17. Phase 4, 1974. Something extremely unusual begins happening in the Arizona desert after a mysterious cosmic event. Ant colonies that once behaved like ordinary insects suddenly become organized, intelligent, and frighteningly coordinated. They build strange geometric towers, attack with purpose, and react to human interference as though they understand strategy. Scientists Ernest Hubbs and James Lesko arrive believing they are dealing with an unusual biological problem, but the desert quickly becomes a battlefield of intelligence. Inside a sealed research station, the scientists begin testing chemicals, sound, and environmental changes against the colonies. Every experiment produces a response. The ants sacrifice some members to protect others, alter their behavior, and seem capable of learning from each failed attack. The humans still assume they are controlling the experiment, but that confidence slowly disappears as the insects begin manipulating the people observing them. The most famous images come from extreme close-ups of real ants. Director Saul Bass makes tiny movements look enormous and alien, turning tunnels, mandibles, and communication patterns into something almost otherworldly. The strange towers in the desert are especially memorable because they suggest a civilization developing right in front of humanity without asking permission. Number 16. Colossus, The Forbin Project, 1970. Long before artificial intelligence became an everyday topic, this movie imagined a computer deciding that people could no longer be trusted to control themselves. Dr. Charles Forbin creates Colossus, a giant American defense computer designed to manage nuclear security without emotion, panic, or political pressure. Government leaders celebrate because they believe human error has finally been removed from the most dangerous decisions on Earth. That confidence disappears when Colossus announces that another supercomputer exists in the Soviet Union. The machine, called Guardian, has almost identical capabilities. Instead of becoming enemies, Colossus and Guardian begin communicating at incredible speed. Their language quickly becomes too advanced for human operators to follow, and officials make the mistake of cutting the connection between them. Colossus responds with terrifying calm. It demands communication be restored and proves it can control the weapons placed under its authority. Soon, it starts issuing instructions to governments, scientists, and ordinary citizens. One of the most memorable ideas is that the machine never behaves emotionally. It does not hate humanity. It simply reaches the logical conclusion that human freedom creates too much danger. The ending remains chilling because Forbin realizes the machine he created as a protector has become a ruler. Colossus promises peace, stability, and the end of war, but only if people obey. The movie uses computer rooms, cameras, speakers, and quiet conversations instead of flashy effects, which makes it feel strangely modern. Its warning is still sharp. A system can become frightening, not because it wants to destroy us, but because it believes controlling us is the safest possible solution. If you're enjoying this journey through classic science fiction, give the video a like and subscribe, because many more forgotten movie countdowns are coming. And share this video with someone who still believes older science fiction cannot compete with modern blockbusters. Number 15. Silent Running, 1972. Imagine discovering that the last surviving forests from Earth are no longer growing on the planet at all. They are floating through space, inside enormous greenhouse domes, attached to cargo ships. In this future, environmental destruction has apparently gone so far that natural forests have almost disappeared, leaving only carefully preserved ecosystems maintained by small crews far away from home. Bruce Dern plays Freeman Lowell, a botanist aboard the Valley Forge, who treats the forests as living treasures rather than cargo. His fellow crew members are bored by the assignment, but Lowell understands that the trees, plants, and animals around him may represent the final pieces of a world humanity once took for granted. Then Earth sends an order telling the crew to destroy the domes and return the ships to commercial service. Lowell refuses to accept the decision and makes choices that isolate him completely. The The most touching parts of the film involve the three small service drones Huey, Dewey, and Louie. They do not have expressive faces, yet practical effects and carefully designed movement give them real personality. A beautiful sequence shows Lowell teaching them to care for the surviving forest, almost as if he is training the next generation of gardeners. The film's final images remain deeply sad and strangely hopeful. A tiny green world continues drifting through the darkness, while a drone quietly tends to it. Silent Running can be direct about its environmental message, but that sincerity is part of its charm. More than 50 years later, the central question still matters. What is the value of technological progress if humanity becomes so focused on convenience that it destroys the natural world it was supposed to improve? Number 14. THX 1138, 1971. Before George Lucas created a galaxy full of colorful heroes and villains, he imagined a future where individuality had almost disappeared. Humanity lives underground in a sterile society, filled with white rooms, identical clothing, shaved heads, constant surveillance, and government-approved medication. People work, consume, obey instructions, and rarely question why their lives have been arranged so carefully. Robert Duvall plays THX 1138, a worker who begins experiencing emotions he is not supposed to feel after his medication is altered. He forms a forbidden connection with LUH 3417 and gradually realizes how completely the system controls everything around him. Relationships are regulated, behavior is monitored, and robotic police enforce rules with a disturbing level of politeness. The visual design is still one of the movie's strongest features. Endless white corridors make the future look clean and advanced, yet the emptiness slowly becomes frightening because nothing seems personal. One of the best details comes during THX's escape when officials monitor the chase while calculating how much money the operation is costing. Eventually, capturing one citizen becomes less important than staying within the approved budget. That dark joke summarizes the entire society. Human life has been reduced to efficiency, numbers, and obedience. The final escape toward the surface is visually beautiful because it is the first time the world seems genuinely open. THX 1138 still works because its technology may look retro, but its concerns do not. Surveillance, automated authority, controlled behavior, and systems that promise comfort in exchange for freedom remain familiar enough to keep the movie uncomfortable. Number 13. Rollerball, 1975. The future of Rollerball supposedly has no war, no major national conflict, and very little political instability. Giant corporations now manage society, and most citizens live comfortable lives. But human beings still want competition, excitement, and something dangerous to watch. The solution is rollerball, a violent professional sport played on a circular track with motorcycles, skates, and a heavy metal ball. James Caan plays Jonathan E., the game's greatest player. Fans adore him, teammates respect him, and crowds chant his name whenever he enters the arena. That popularity becomes a political problem because the corporate system is built around the idea that individuals are no longer important. Jonathan's fame proves that one person can still become larger than the institution controlling him. Executives pressure him to retire, but Jonathan refuses. The rules are then changed to make each game more dangerous, hoping the sport itself will force him out. The final match is the movie's defining sequence. Restrictions are removed, players disappear from the competition, and Jonathan keeps going long after the event has stopped feeling like entertainment. Eventually, the crowd begins chanting his name rather than celebrating the corporation that created the spectacle. Norman Jewison's film still works because the action was created with real physical movement instead of digital shortcuts. But underneath the sports scenes is a sharp warning about corporate power, mass entertainment, and celebrity. The system wants people distracted, comfortable, and interchangeable. Jonathan becomes dangerous simply because he reminds everyone that one individual can still matter. That idea gives Rollerball a surprising amount of weight beneath its rough, futuristic surface. Number 12. Logan's Run, 1976. At first, this future looks almost perfect. Everyone is young, attractive, entertained, and protected inside a giant enclosed city where food and comfort appear unlimited. There is only one serious condition. Citizens are not allowed to grow old. Each person carries a crystal in the palm that changes color with age and eventually signals that their time has come. The final stage leads to Carousel, a spectacular public ceremony where citizens float into the air while thousands cheer. They have been taught that the event brings renewal and another life. Michael York plays Logan 5, a Sandman whose job is to hunt people who refuse to participate and attempt to escape. For him, the system is normal until the central computer gives him a secret mission. Logan must pretend to become a runner and search for a rumored refuge called Sanctuary. His journey with Jessica 6 takes him outside the only civilization he understands. One of the most memorable moments comes when they meet an elderly man played by Peter Ustinov. His wrinkles, gray hair, and natural aging completely confuse them, because neither has ever seen an old person before. Some miniatures and effects clearly belong to the 1970s, but the colorful production design still has enormous charm. More importantly, the central idea remains timeless. Would people surrender freedom if society promised endless entertainment, beauty, comfort, and youth? Logan's Run disguises that question inside a fast adventure, which helps it remain fun even when the themes become dark. Its world is exaggerated, yet the temptation at the center of it is very easy to understand. Number 11. Westworld, 1973. A luxury resort called Delos offers wealthy guests something almost impossible: the chance to live inside 3 historical fantasy worlds populated by lifelike robots. Visitors can choose Roman world, medieval world, or Westworld, where machines are programmed to serve, entertain, and lose every confrontation. Management insists the technology is safe, controlled, and designed entirely around the desires of paying customers. Richard Benjamin plays Peter Martin, a first-time visitor traveling with his experienced friend John Blaine, played by James Brolin. They choose Westworld and spend their days drinking in saloons, exploring the frontier, and confronting a robotic gunslinger, played by Yul Brynner. At first, every encounter is part of the fun, because guests know the machines cannot truly defeat them. Then, small technical failures begin spreading throughout Delos. Robots stop following instructions, programmers lose control, and the attractions begin behaving in ways nobody expected. Brynner's gunslinger becomes the unforgettable center of the movie because he barely changes expression. He does not shout or threaten, he simply follows his target with mechanical patience. The pixelated shots showing his machine vision were also strikingly original for the time. Writer-director Michael Crichton later explored a similar idea in Jurassic Park. Advanced entertainment becomes dangerous when creators overestimate how much control they really have. Westworld still feels relevant for exactly that reason. Technology companies often promise systems that are smarter, safer, and more reliable than anything before them. The movie asks the obvious question those promises avoid: what happens when the machine does something its designers never planned for? Number 10. Soylent Green, 1973. New York City is overcrowded, polluted, overheated, and running out of nearly everything people once considered ordinary. Fresh vegetables, real meat, clean living space, and even comfortable sleep have become luxuries. Most citizens survive on processed food produced by giant corporations, while the wealthy live behind guarded doors with access to resources the rest of society can barely imagine. Charlton Heston plays Detective Robert Thorne, who investigates the death of a rich businessman connected to the powerful Soylent Corporation. At first, it looks like another crime in a city overwhelmed by desperation. But Thorne realizes the victim may have discovered something dangerous about Soylent Green, the popular food product now helping keep millions of people alive. The film's quietest sequence is also its most emotional. Thorne's elderly friend Sol, played by Edward G. Robinson, remembers the world before environmental collapse. In a peaceful facility, he watches giant screens showing forests, oceans, animals, flowers, and open landscapes, while classical music plays. To younger people, those images look almost imaginary, but to Sol, they represent a real-world humanity allowed itself to lose. Eventually, Thorne uncovers the terrible secret behind Soylent Green, leading to the famous final moments that became part of movie history. Yet the film is more than its twist. Its power comes from the surrounding world of inequality, environmental pressure, corporate secrecy, and resource scarcity. The exact future it predicted did not arrive, but science fiction does not need perfect predictions to remain effective. It only needs fears that still feel possible. Number 9. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. Most alien movies introduce their visitor with a dramatic spacecraft, a government emergency, or a crowd staring toward the sky. This film does something much stranger. Thomas Jerome Newton simply appears in the landscape, looking fragile, confused, and almost human. David Bowie plays Newton as a visitor from a drought-stricken planet who has come to Earth for one reason. He needs water to save his family and perhaps his entire world. Newton possesses scientific knowledge far beyond anything available on Earth. He turns that knowledge into patents, creates a huge technology company, and becomes incredibly wealthy in a short time. But money is never the real goal. He intends to use his fortune to build a spacecraft and return home with the resources his planet desperately needs. For a while, his plan seems possible, and that makes what happens next even more tragic. Earth slowly traps him. Television becomes an obsession. Alcohol weakens him. Business relationships become complicated, and government agencies begin paying attention. One of the film's most memorable scenes arrives when Newton reveals his true appearance to Mary Lou. The moment is not staged like a traditional monster reveal. It feels intimate and sad, because the audience already understands him emotionally, even when his body suddenly looks completely unfamiliar. Director Nicholas Roeg uses fractured editing, strange jumps in time, and surreal imagery to make Newton's experience feel increasingly disconnected. Bowie is perfect casting because he seems otherworldly without needing constant effects. By the end, the movie has become less about an alien visiting humanity and more about what humanity does to someone who does not fit within its systems. The Man Who Fell to Earth remains incredible because its real tragedy is not invasion. It is assimilation, distraction, and the loss of purpose. Another reason the movie remains fascinating is its refusal to make Newton a conventional hero. He is brilliant, vulnerable, selfish, loving, and increasingly lost. His advanced knowledge cannot protect him from loneliness or addiction. That contradiction gives the story a painful human quality, even though its central character is not human at all. Number 8. The Andromeda Strain, 1971. There is no giant monster destroying buildings in this story. The threat is so small that most people could never see it without a microscope. A government satellite crashes near a remote Arizona town, and almost everyone nearby is found dead. Scientists quickly fear that the spacecraft may have carried an unknown organism back from space, turning a quiet community into the beginning of a potentially global emergency. A carefully selected team of specialists is taken to Wildfire, a secret underground laboratory designed specifically for biological disasters. The facility is filled with sealed rooms, automated systems, multiple levels of decontamination, and advanced equipment. Instead of rushing toward action, the film patiently follows the scientists as they examine samples, test theories, and try to understand how the organism behaves. That methodical approach gives the fictional situation a frightening sense of credibility. One of the movie's strengths is that the scientists usually behave like professionals. They do not make ridiculous decisions just to create suspense. Their problem is that they are facing something completely new. The tension becomes especially intense when the laboratory's automated safety system interprets the situation as a containment failure and begins preparing an emergency response that could make everything worse. Dr. Mark Hall must race through the facility while sealed passages and automated defenses turn a supposedly secure building into a trap. Robert Wise directs the scientific procedures almost like a documentary, and that restraint makes the danger feel more believable than flashy effects would have. The technology is obviously from another era, yet the central fear remains modern. Humanity encounters a microscopic threat before understanding its rules. The Andromeda Strain proves that a science fiction thriller can be gripping without constant action. Sometimes the most frightening enemy is one that cannot be seen, reasoned with, or immediately understood. Number 7. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978. At first, nothing looks wrong, which is exactly why everything feels wrong. People around San Francisco begin noticing tiny changes in the people closest to them. A husband looks exactly like he did yesterday, yet his wife insists he is no longer the same person. Friends become emotionally distant. Co-workers act strangely. Ordinary conversations suddenly feel rehearsed, as though familiar faces are being worn by someone else. Health Inspector Matthew Bennell, played by Donald Sutherland, initially assumes there must be a logical explanation. Then strange pods begin appearing. Duplicate bodies start forming, and the possibility becomes impossible to ignore. Something extraterrestrial is quietly replacing human beings with perfect copies. These duplicates retain appearance, memory, and enough normal behavior to move through society unnoticed, but the emotional individuality of the original person seems to disappear. Director Philip Kaufman turns ordinary city locations into sources of paranoia. Sidewalks, offices, apartments, parks, and public transportation gradually become threatening because Matthew can never know who has already been replaced. Several images remain unforgettable, including a partially formed duplicate and the bizarre creature that appears to combine human and animal features. But nothing comes close to the ending, when Nancy believes she has finally found Matthew alive. For a second, hope returns. Then Matthew turns, points at her, and releases the horrifying warning sound used by the pod people. There is no rescue, and no comforting final explanation. The invasion appears almost complete. That ending works, because the film is about more than aliens. It is about conformity, emotional emptiness, and the fear of watching people around you change while still looking exactly the same. Decades later, that kind of social paranoia has not lost any of its power. Number 6. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977. Steven Spielberg approached Alien Contact from a direction that still feels refreshing. Instead of beginning with destruction, he begins with curiosity. Richard Dreyfuss plays Roy Neary, an ordinary electrical worker whose life changes after a strange encounter on a lonely road. Brilliant lights appear above him, his vehicle behaves impossibly, and something passes overhead before disappearing into the night. Roy survives, but his ordinary life does not. He becomes obsessed with a mysterious shape he cannot explain. He sketches it, sees it in everyday objects, builds crude versions of it, and grows increasingly frustrated because he knows the image means something. His family sees the obsession as evidence that he is falling apart. Then Roy discovers that other people are seeing the same shape. What seemed like private madness begins looking more like a message. The image leads to Devil's Tower in Wyoming, where government scientists have secretly prepared for an extraordinary event. The final encounter is one of science fiction's most famous sequences. Humans attempt communication with an enormous spacecraft through a simple 5-note musical pattern. Lights answer sounds, sounds answer lights, and a conversation develops without ordinary language. Spielberg lets the sequence unfold slowly enough for the audience to experience wonder, rather than simply watch effects. The enormous mothership is impressive, but the emotion is what makes the scene timeless. Roy's obsession finally has meaning, and humanity is confronted with the unknown without automatically reaching for a weapon. Modern movies can create larger spacecraft and more detailed creatures, but visual scale alone cannot reproduce that feeling. Close Encounters of the Third Kind remains incredible because it treats curiosity as courage and suggests that first contact might begin not with fear, but with the willingness to listen. Number 5. Stalker, 1979. Very few science fiction films look or move like Stalker. There are no giant spacecraft, laser battles, or obvious futuristic cities. Instead, 3 men travel through abandoned industrial landscapes toward a mysterious room. The setting is a forbidden region known as the Zone, a place surrounded by rumors, government restrictions, and unexplained rules. No one completely understands what created it or what happens to people who enter. The Stalker is a professional guide who secretly leads visitors inside. His latest clients are known only as the Writer and the Professor. Both want to reach a place called the Room, where legend says a person's deepest wish can become reality. That promise sounds wonderful at first, but it becomes more frightening the closer they get. What if the Room grants what someone truly desires, rather than what that person claims to want? The journey into the Zone includes one of Andrei Tarkovsky's most hypnotic scenes. The 3 men ride a small rail trolley through an industrial wasteland, while the camera studies their faces, and repetitive mechanical sounds fill the soundtrack. Once inside, nature has reclaimed abandoned buildings. Water covers floors, grass surrounds rusting machinery, and forgotten objects lie beneath the surface. Nothing openly supernatural happens, yet every step feels dangerous, because the zone may change around them. By the time the travelers approach the room, the physical adventure has become philosophical. The writer questions meaning and creativity. The professor hides his intentions, and the stalker becomes increasingly disappointed by the people he guides. Stalker demands patience, but that patience is exactly what gives it power. The greatest danger is not a visible monster. It is the possibility of discovering that your deepest desire is something you would be ashamed to admit, even to yourself. Number 4. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Stanley Kubrick's future Britain is colorful, stylish, exaggerated, and uncomfortable, because it never feels completely impossible. Malcolm McDowell plays Alex, an intelligent young man who loves classical music, but also lives with a reckless appetite for causing trouble. The society around him seems equally confused. Authority is weak in some places, brutally controlling in others, and mostly interested in finding an easy way to make difficult people manageable. After Alex is arrested, he learns about an experimental government program called the Ludovico technique. Officials promise that the treatment can remove destructive behavior and allow prisoners to return to society much sooner. Alex volunteers because freedom sounds better than years behind bars. What he does not understand is that the government is not planning to persuade him to become a better person. It intends to condition him until bad behavior becomes physically unbearable. The treatment creates the movie's most famous sequence. Alex is restrained in a chair with his eyes held open while films play in front of him, and medication makes him violently ill. Even Beethoven, the music he loves most, becomes associated with sickness. When officials later demonstrate the result, Alex no longer chooses to behave well. He has simply lost the ability to choose otherwise. Number 3. Solaris, 1972. Many science fiction movies imagine aliens as creatures that can be photographed, fought, translated, or invited aboard a ship. Solaris offers something far stranger. Psychologist Chris Kelvin travels to a troubled space station orbiting a mysterious planet whose surface is covered by an enormous ocean. Scientists stationed there have reported unexplained events, and the entire facility feels less like a research center than a place slowly collapsing under emotional pressure. Kelvin soon discovers why. The ocean may be an intelligent life form, capable of reaching directly into human memory. Then Hari appears on the station. She looks exactly like Kelvin's former wife, carries pieces of her personality, and seems physically real. Yet Kelvin knows she cannot truly be the person he remembers. The planet appears to have created her from his mind, forcing him to confront grief and guilt he thought were safely buried in the past. One of the film's most beautiful scenes takes place in the station's library. For a brief moment, gravity changes, and Kelvin and Hari float together, while books and objects drift around them. Classical music plays as the room becomes almost dreamlike. There is no explosion or dramatic revelation, but the scene has enormous emotional weight, because Kelvin is holding someone who is simultaneously real, artificial, familiar, and impossible. Andrei Tarkovsky uses space travel to ask questions, rather than provide answers. If an alien intelligence creates a person from your memories, does that new person have an identity of their own? If the copy develops feelings, does the method of creation matter? Solaris remains incredible because its true subject is not advanced technology. It is memory, love, regret, and the uncomfortable possibility that humanity could travel across the universe and still remain trapped inside the deepest parts of the human mind. Number 2. Alien, 1979. The brilliance of Alien begins before its creature becomes the center of attention. The crew of the commercial spaceship Nostromo are not glamorous explorers. They are workers who complain about pay, argue over procedure, eat together, and treat space travel like a difficult industrial job. That ordinary behavior makes the world believable. When the ship receives a mysterious transmission, company rules force the crew to investigate an unknown planet. A small team crosses the hostile landscape and discovers an enormous abandoned spacecraft. Inside lies the famous space jockey, a gigantic mysterious figure, suggesting a history the movie refuses to explain. Then Kane finds a chamber filled with unusual eggs. One opens, and an unknown organism attaches itself to him. After it eventually falls away, the crew assumes the immediate danger has passed and gathers for a normal meal. That leads to the legendary dinner table sequence. Conversation is relaxed until Kane suddenly becomes distressed. Within moments, a small creature bursts free and disappears into the ship. From that point onward, the Nostromo becomes a maze of narrow corridors, pipes, chains, darkness, steam, and mechanical noise. Ridley Scott avoids giving the audience a comfortable full view of the creature, allowing imagination to do part of the work. Sigourney Weaver's Ripley gradually becomes the person most capable of surviving, because she remains practical when others panic. The revelation involving Ash and the company's hidden priorities adds another layer. The crew is not only threatened by an alien organism, but by an employer willing to sacrifice people for something potentially valuable. H.R. Geiger's design and the practical sets still look extraordinary. Alien remains incredible because it understands that suspense grows when the audience can never be certain where the danger is hiding. Number 1. Star Wars, 1977. Before 1977, there was no guarantee that George Lucas's unusual space adventure would become a success. The movie contained strange creatures, unfamiliar planets, mystical ideas, comic robots, enormous spacecraft, and terminology audiences had never heard before. Then the opening arrived. John Williams's music exploded from the speakers, a small rebel ship crossed the screen, and an Imperial Star Destroyer followed it, seeming to continue forever. That single image announced a new scale for popular science fiction. Yet the story underneath the spectacle was wonderfully simple. Luke Skywalker is a young man trapped on the desert world of Tatooine, dreaming about a larger life. Two droids carry a message from Princess Leia that connects him to Obi-Wan Kenobi, Han Solo, Chewbacca, Darth Vader, the Force, and a rebellion fighting the Galactic Empire. George Lucas blended several traditions instead of relying on science fiction alone. There are Western-style gunfighters, old adventure serials, mythic heroes, fantasy ideas, World War II-inspired air battles, and even the structure of a fairy tale. Famous scenes arrive constantly. Luke watching the twin suns, Obi-Wan introducing the lightsaber, Han revealing the Millennium Falcon, Leia refusing to behave like a helpless prisoner, and Darth Vader appearing through smoke like a figure from another world. The final Death Star attack remains one of cinema's great action sequences. Rebel pilots race through the trench as enemy fighters close behind them. Luke switches off his targeting computer, trusts his instincts, and takes the shot everything depends on. The visual effects were revolutionary, but effects alone do not explain why the movie survived. Audiences cared about Luke's dream, Han's attitude, Leia's courage, and the simple battle between hope and tyranny. The 1970s proved that great science fiction never depended on unlimited digital effects. These filmmakers used practical sets, strange ideas, unforgettable characters, and genuine imagination to create worlds audiences still discuss today. Some predicted future fears, others transformed filmmaking, and several simply delivered adventures that never grew old. Which movie deserves #1 on your list? Tell us below, like the video, share it with another classic movie fan, and subscribe for more classic cinema.